Welcome to the Action Item Podcast. Meet your hosts, Trevor Hunter and Leo Lopez. They dive into their personal experiences and client stories, discussing hurdles, struggles, and successes. And at the end of each show, you'll get a simple action item that you can put in play today to make a real impact on your business.
What's going on? This is Trevor with the Action Item Podcast. I've got Leo here as usual.
Hi, everybody.
So today I want to start off with a story. And this is about the legal conundrums that can fall on a small business owner. And at the end of it, we'll talk about some legal essentials that every small business should have. I stumbled across this story on Threads. I've been really active on Threads as of late. And this lady is a branding expert. And I'm not going to read it verbatim, but basically she had a friend, not a client, but a friend, who started up a business. And I don't know what they sold, but it was a Shopify store. And basically she used Canva for everything. And this is not a bash Canva type thing. Maybe a little bit. But but she built everything with Canva. Her logo, all of her...
I mean, you can build your website on Canva, so it sounds like she pretty much every imagery, collateral, whatever she did, which...
Yeah. So there's a problem with intellectual property with Canva. So she built this entire business. Again, I don't know what the products were, but she grew it up to, she was making 6 figures a month, which is obviously a proper living. And then suddenly someone copies her. Exactly. They released an exact clone of her website, exact same logo, the whole deal. She contacted attorneys to get it removed, and there was nothing she could do because she had used Canva for the logo and so forth. There was no intellectual property. She didn't own anything. So
wait, hold on a second. So she has something, www.something.com. Somebody else copied her website, literally just carbon copied her website.
That's correct.
Right? And she had no legal recourse.
None at all.
Wow.
Because she had nothing that was trademarkable. Because all of her content was from Canva, which has no IP. So this other entity, you might say, well, you just outperform them and do better. But this other entity was scamming people. So people would see her on Instagram or whatever and go to buy her items. And then they would come back to a website, and somehow, I don't know how they would actually hijack the traffic. In theory, if you're on Instagram, you should be clicking the link and so forth. But they ended up on the wrong website buying things that were never delivered. So they were just taking the money. And of course, that shed a bad light on her because to the general public, they don't have a differential of this is a replica and this is the authentic one. So they started bashing her. And long story short, she lost everything. She lost her. It actually went into saying she lost her house because she had to shut. Yeah.
Wow.
There was nothing she could do. She tried to report it. They had fake Instagram accounts too and stuff that she says. And she had friends and family try to report the fake accounts and nothing was done. She lost her entire business because she didn't have a proper infrastructure to begin with.
That's awful.
It is.
This is obviously a nightmare scenario for any business owner. And it's, and I get that if you don't have a trademark, okay, I can get that. But the fact that they were getting in there and taking her customers away, it sounds pretty sophisticated.
Well, probably not. They could literally, because this is the way social media functions, if you create a clone account and it doesn't get flagged and you're using all the same hashtags, when somebody's going through the, Discover or whatever that thing is on Instagram, they could just as likely end up with one of on the fake post as the real post, because all they were doing was cloning her post. So she would post, hey, I'm having this new product launch tomorrow, and they would have, hey, we're having this new product launch tomorrow. It would go to the fake website. I mean, they just replicated her entire business. Yeah, It was terrible. Now, I do not have a solution for, well, I do. You have to set things up properly in the beginning. And that does mean designing your own logo, getting a logo professionally done, or something where you don't rely on something that has no intellectual property, doesn't grant you any intellectual property when you obtain it.
So I think, first and foremost, the trademark thing, right? And this is very hard for smaller businesses and, micropreneurs, solopreneurs. Legal costs money, although I think it's getting a little bit easier now with companies like LegalZoom, and there's no shortage of companies out there competing to help business owners. But I think that this is kind of first and foremost just important to highlight that if at the very least you need to have a protection of your brand. And so when I started Calltastic, that was one of the things we did before we even had a website. And it was a long process, but the fact that once you do the application and they're checking to make sure that there's no conflicts and you're in that process, that already goes a long way. That if you ran into a copycat and you have records that show that you filed first and that you're actively intending to or use this in your business, that does offer some amount of protection or an advantage if things ever got into kind of a legal issue, right? Yeah. So that was the very first thing we did.
Yeah, and there's, I can't think of what the term is right now, but once you start using something that is yours, say you grind out a 20-hour session on learning how to use Illustrator and you build your own logo and you begin using that logo, getting a trademark for that logo can be a couple $100. It's not a huge thing.
Yeah.
But just the mere action of you using that logo for commerce does grant you some levels of protection because it is an original thing. Now, I can't remember what the test is. I'm trying to pull up my blog. I actually wrote a thing about it.
I mean, we're definitely not legal experts by any stretch of the imagination. However, we've gone through these experiences. I will say, I reiterate that getting that trademark done and your company name and or trademark and kind of look and feel logo and the services that you're providing opens up a lot of benefits. And I'll use a couple of examples. I mean, I did have a company that had a logo that literally looked like they took our company logo and just changed the colors and added a border. And we were able to get them to successfully, cease and desist because we had our trademark protection already done, our certificate of trademark. The other thing too, this is something unrelated, but it's interesting. We had a website that when we first set up, and we didn't use our current company name because it was like $5,000, $7,000 for the domain, right? Come to find out that if you have that trademark and there is a company that has your domain name, you can actually tell that company, I need my domain back and I will give you a reasonable fee, but that belongs to me. And you actually have legal grounds. You can look this up. There's a process with ICANN or the organizations that manage domains and companies where ultimately if you have trademark legal certification of trademark for something, you can claw that back. Now, they're smart because it costs about $2,500 probably to have an attorney file all of the legal things and everything that you need and the fees to have this looked up and the process. But, what we did is we negotiated the price down and, we ended up giving them a couple of grand. I mean, but it was, the attorneys that we spoke to just said, look, don't even hire us for this. Just make them an offer. They are smart. They know that, they're not going to get more than $2,000, $2,500 for this, and that's fine. Yeah. But they prey on people who don't know. So again, a little bit of a tangent, but so, there's definitely advantages to doing that at the very least. How many of you all copyright your actual website content? God, I don't know anybody that actually goes through the copyright process. Maybe I'm wrong, but everybody puts copyright on their webpage. But the trademark, definitely non-negotiable.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And then what I was looking for is called the sleek craft test. So you would make the assumption that, okay, so say you take and somebody takes Rolex and they decide to build a new Rolex, a new company, and they are going to build watches. Well, they obviously are trying to infringe upon the Rolex patent or the Rolex trademark, correct?
Right.
But say you're in Southern California and your grandfather's last name was Rolex, and you want to start Rolex Fish Market, and you have a logo that has no similarities to the crown or nothing like that, and you call it Rolex, the Rolex Fish Market. You're not violating anything at that point, because the proximity of goods, they're not remotely similar in offerings, and the marks, the actual graphic part of it is dissimilar as well. So the part of the copyright and trademark aspect is this entity trying to portray that they are this entity? And in those instances, that's a determination for the courts. But, if your competitor, if you buy a name and you trademark it for call center, I could absolutely start up Calltastic Loan Service and you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, there's actually a Calltastic Flowers in the South Bay over here in Los Angeles. I have no idea why they call it that, but you're absolutely right. Again, it's about the purpose and what you're actually doing. We originally wanted a different company name, but somebody else was already using that name as very specifically as a call center company, so we just we couldn't do it. There's just no way around it. So yeah, definitely. I mean, again, it's a horrible experience, and I got to tell you, you mentioned that they copied her social media, and if anybody's caught some of these articles recently from influencers or from individuals who are actually generating revenue from their social media, they have found themselves in a situation where either their profile is blocked for some reason, or is imitated, or like you said, is cloned. And first and foremost, it is a absolute struggle to actually get any type of customer service out of Meta. I mean, I honestly, this is the company that defies the adage that good customer experience helps you grow your company. No. They are giving the finger to customer care and customer experience, and they're getting away with it.
No exaggeration. I have a support ticket with Facebook that I think is back to 2021, and it said, and when I go to check it, because it actually it's about a financial transaction, but so it's something that I still occasionally go back and check on, and they're like, "We'll be with you as soon as possible. Please do not resubmit this thing." I'm like,
oh my God, wow, yeah, 3 years. It's sitting in some queue. I could see where if she doesn't have the trademark, then there's nothing she can do. Trying to stop these other accounts, we've had accounts opened up trashing us, which if you're not getting sued or talked shit about, and you're not doing things right, there's nothing we can do to stop somebody. They're not using our exact brand name and trademark, so there's nothing you can do. So, but the Canva thing, that is interesting, because again, and I'm not a legal expert, but I guess you really can't. And I use Canva all the time, so this is kind of something that's a little interesting because I don't have a creative bone in my body. So I'm like, oh my God, can someone just copy my website layout or any of my images? And I mean, I obviously don't have the rights to those images. They're basically open to whoever is registered with Canva, right? This is royalty free.
Yeah,
right?
so for example, in your particular scenario, I built your website. So it is actually copywritten. But the images that you've given me that come from Canva, those are not. So someone could create a similar, use those same images on their site, but if they created a clone of that website, it would not be okay.
Wow. So I guess the $1 million question then is what can business owners do to stop this from happening in terms of spoofing or imposters, or not being able to protect your intellectual property?
You have to spend a little bit of money up front to have everything set up. That's the unfortunate truth. Everybody, the reason why Canva has the appeal is it allows for you to essentially, in a day, pretty much, build a semi-professional look. But none of it's protected. For you to spend money to accomplish the same task, you're talking about hiring a graphic designer to design you a logo, and that can be $100 or $5,000, So it really depends on what you're going for. But that's basically it. You just have to set up everything properly.
If I use Canva to set up a logo, now let's just say I move things around. It's not one of those templatized logos. I change the font. I do all this kind of stuff, and I take that logo in its new iteration. I can trademark that, right? And even though it is Canva,
supposedly not.
It's
okay.
Really?
So that's apparently a speculation that's currently being discussed, kind of in the higher circles of whether or not that actually does qualify for protection, because you're using elements that Canva provided you. You're not like, say you had Leo Lopez and you wanted a fleur-de-lis on either side, and your name going across a circle and a couple things of wheat because you wanted to start a beer brand in the middle. Well, you're pulling a fleur-de-lis from their image section. You're using that. You're pulling barley and wheat logo in, or a graphic in, and utilizing that. And even though you constructed all those items into what you would think is an original piece of art, is it? And
well, this reminds me. I was reading through the news. There's an artist who is suing the federal government because he tried to apply for protection of intellectual property for art that he made using AI. Now, you might think, oh, it's AI, you can't, right? But his argument is he spent 600 hours on customizing the AI and prompts and refining, and like this wasn't just AI, give me a picture of gals or whatever, and then it does it. He's saying I've put in hours upon hours of effort to make this image appear the way it was. And so, but the government's saying there's not enough of your work in this to be able to allow for protection. And they said, even if you had at least gone in and done something, like maybe even blurred it or, of your own that's unique, perhaps. But, so this is kind of I think, part of, I don't know if the laws are caught up with this whole situation, especially with AI marketing, creative generators now, logo generation, all of that kind of stuff. You
Well,
know, it's definitely
they operate years. The government operates years behind, anyways. You know.
Yeah.
I remember I saw the same article, and I think based on the content, if he appeals it in the right way, it will eventually get through.
Recently, a teenager was fighting the DMV because they wouldn't issue a license because she took a test in a Tesla, and they were, the instructor was claiming that she was using Tesla's systems to help her, which she didn't, because she didn't use full auto drive, nor was that available. But they're saying she didn't use her rear view mirror, as opposed to obviously the backup cameras and screens. So there's definitely
the
government's always
somebody being a dick.
Yeah,
I mean that.
Oh yeah, no, but this came up, man. This happened, and they turned around finally after pressure, probably from one of those consumer news channels or whatever, kind of came back and said we recognize that we are behind, right? Like so yeah. I mean, long story short, I think that it's some of this stuff is scary because especially now in this age of technology that we're in, I mean, this poor woman to lose, her livelihood and her home, because of these bad actors that went in there. So I think it's more important than ever to make sure that we have, the legal basis covered. And so I think if you were to tell our listeners, I know you're going to put out a kind of a legal checklist for everybody as far as the action items. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Like, what is the action item takeaway, and what would your advice be to new businesses or existing businesses about the most critical legal protections they should have in place?
Well, the essentials are actually geared more toward the local service businesses. This whole topic came from a Trademark and more of an online business. Obviously, if you're a landscaping company, it would be quite harder for somebody to try to replicate your entire business because, well, people have to deal with you face to face. So that's a much different thing. But the legal essentials for this, which is what we draft up for nearly every client that is in that type of space. And when I say local services, I mean a service in which somebody calls up and says, hey, I need somebody to come do this thing at my house, or I need to have this done at my business. Plumbers and heating and air guys.
Cleaning, HVAC.
Yep, all the people who do work. The first one is a authorized point of contact agreement. You'd be surprised at how often that's missed, and you're suddenly a week into a project or hours into a project, and suddenly somebody else comes into the field of view and they're like, hey, no, I don't want it done this way, I want it done this way. And you're like, yeah, but Jim said, well, I don't give a shit what Jim says. I'm the one paying you. And you're like, I've never met you before. So suddenly you have no idea. So having that authorized point of contact agreement as part of an item in your paperwork is critical because you need to know who is in charge of this particular job.
Right.
The next piece is a landowner permission for work, which, again, is something that a lot of people miss because some people are on rented property or rental house or leased land, and the landowner shows up or the homeowner shows up and has no idea that you're doing a porch on the back of their rental house, and the renter never asked permission, and suddenly you have no idea. So what I advise for clients to do is when they get a new job, and it's a bit labor, I realize this, but they pull it up on GIS and see who the landowner is or the homeowner. And if the homeowner matches who they're doing business with, then you don't have to worry about it. If it doesn't, then there needs to be a conversation. Figure out, okay, so do you own this? I need permission from whoever owns this to do this work. It saves you. I mean, I have a client that didn't do this. The reason we started putting it in was because he got sued. And he lost because he didn't have permission to put a driveway or a road up through the mountain where they wanted him to go. A service and safety agreement. And this is worded nicely, But this is a contract that basically tells the person that you're doing the work for to stay out of my way. If you're a tree guy or whatever, this is an agreement that says the homeowner is going to stay in the house or stay away from where you're dropping trees, and it keeps them out of the danger zone, but it also keeps them out of your hair. So it's a pretty nice one to have. Then the next document is a change order document, because since you was here, have you ever had that one, Leo? Since you was here?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And no, the first document illustrated everything that we're going to do for you as a customer, and if you want this other thing done, we need a change order. This is going to be something new. This is a new proposal, new cost, new timeline, new everything. I mean, it might be something we take care of this afternoon, but it's still going to be a piece of paper that's handled before we do that.
So clearly each business will have its own unique legal needs, especially if you need licensure contract, or you're in specific types of businesses, you're going into people's houses. I know that I could throw a couple in there right off the bat that are just probably maybe universal. Definitely the trademark and logo. That one you want to have nailed down, if anything. If you have partners, or if you're in your business for yourself, you should definitely have already decided if you are a self-proprietor, or if you're using a different corporate legal entity to protect yourself, which is kind of another higher level one, which I think definitely, absolutely must have, because that is going to affect taxes, that's going to affect everything, but most importantly, your liability, right? I mean, like this woman who lost her house.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know to what extent, right? Like, how was she not protected from, I don't know the situation. Maybe she put in a lot of her personal investment, whatever, but, into the business. But that's definitely, again, I mean, so I would say, yes, it's a cost, but not having these protections in place can turn into some really nightmare situations, as this woman's experienced. So absolutely, I think, please, we encourage you to make sure you've got kind of some of those legal basics down, and we'll put that checklist out for you that could apply to just about any business. And I mean, look, your service agreement, your change order, I have the same thing. I'm not a service-based business, at least not on, I'm not cleaning houses or a plumber, but, we are providing business services. And we do the same thing. It's here's what we agree to do. We're going to do it for you. If you want something else, we can do that. But I need to document this so that there's just no question that of why this is being done, or how much, because it will come back and bite you in the ass.
And there's one more, and it's probably the one that I think is as important as anything: payment terms. And I don't mean payments due upon invoice, and that being the singular line item. It needs to be detailed. What happens if it's late? What will you do at 15 days late, at 30 days late? At what point do you take legal action? At what point will you start adding interest and fines and penalties? Maybe you're not going to do any of that, but your payment terms shouldn't be a one-liner. Your payment terms need to be like this much on a piece of paper. Like, it should be very, agreed, so that no matter what the situation is, they paid me half the money, what do I do? I see so many businesses. I see it on threads all the time. I got paid a deposit, I've delivered the work, what do I do? I don't know. What does your contract say? You shouldn't have to ask this question. You should know what you do. At day 10, you're going to go to the courthouse and file civil paperwork, or whatever your action is. So it's not hard to draft these things up, like Leo said. You just need them. You need to figure out which ones apply to your business and rock and roll. And as the action item for this one, I will put together I actually have a web page on my site for this, but I'll throw together a list of what these documents are, and maybe some examples, if I have the time to put that together, of what those pieces of those documentations look like for you to download. and can just kind of plug in some of your own variables in there. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Well, yeah, definitely good topic to discuss. So, everybody, of course, I think we've just added some additional contact us links on our Action Item Podcast website. So, yeah, any questions or comments on this episode, let us know.
Good deal. All right, guys. See you next week.
Thanks, everybody.